good. All right, good evening. It is 5 p.m., Tuesday, December 13th, 2022, special city council meeting. Would like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that have been duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Nicole, you want to do roll call for us?
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Myers. Councilmember Popson.
Here.
Councilmember Streetman.
Here.
Councilmember Ward.
Here.
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Bogosian.
Here.
Councilmember Hahn.
Here.
Mayor Pounds.
Here.
You have a quorum?
Thank you. Purpose tonight, we've got a couple of guests with us first, Mayor O'Neill from Sullivan's and Andy Benke from Sullivan's, Town Administrator. Also, thank you both for coming over and joining us. Appreciate that. Yeah. And reserved seating, Pat. You know what I'm saying? It's good. You can move around if you want. So first item tonight is presentation from the SCDOT of alternative configurations for the IOP connector. We had tried to pull this off a few weeks ago, and consultants were wrapping up their reports. So we're glad to have a couple of representatives from the SCDOT here tonight. First is Rob Perry, Chief Engineer for Bridges, and joining him is Leland Colvin, Deputy Secretary for Engineering. So thank you both for coming to spend some time with us and putting the results together for the last few months, and we'll just turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Mayor Pounds and City Council and Ms. Fregosa for hosting us tonight. I'm sorry that we couldn't make it last week, but we want to make sure that we had these concepts buttoned up and in accordance with something that we would actually allow. Our consultant, RK&K, we contract with them fall of 2021 after the 2021 beach season to really take a full deep dive study of the Isle of Palms connector, as well as some other operational improvements that could be made to help move traffic on and off the island more efficiently and effectively. So with that, they've come up with several concepts for us to present tonight. I wish I'd known they had a meeting tonight. It looks like it'll be early January, because that's what they told me when I asked their staff. And then we'll put this out for a public comment period through a social media platform that allows folks to comment on some of our projects. We've used the same cyclomedia on larger projects like Carolina Crossroads in Columbia. So now probably on 526 as well, but I'm not sure. So I was going to dive into a couple of the study requirements, which help you understand how we landed where we are. Regardless of the outcome, we want to make sure we continue to provide pedestrian and bicyclist accommodations across the bridge, just given the fact that it is a recognized greenway and a East Coast Greenway and the Berkeley, Charleston, Dorchester COG plan, as long as another plan that I believe it's a Battery to the Beach route from Filey to Isle of Palms. So, and it's in the Town of Mount Pleasant's comprehensive plan. So that was one of our requirements for RK&K, our consultant, to include. We wanted a minimum of one 11-foot travel lane in each direction on all concepts. We wanted a 4-foot shy line for the concepts that had vehicular traffic close to the wall, because that's just one of our requirements. As y'all have probably been through some construction work zones in other states, you just don't feel real comfortable when you're driving right up on the edge of a wall. And plus, we all know that there are the drainage features that are within a foot of the wall as well, so we certainly don't want vehicular traffic riding on that. We also had a minimum of 1-foot shy line for the pedestrians and bicyclists, because the same thing goes. You don't want your handlebars riding up on a concrete barrier wall. We also have had a 10-foot minimum for the multi-use paths. As you'll see, most of them have 5 and 5 in each direction. And then finally, we didn't want to have any concepts that were going to do things that were going to cross traffic in front of pedestrian and bicycle traffic in front of vehicular traffic. I don't know if you have any hawk signals or in this area. I should have checked, but we have some in Columbia area. And what happens is the pedestrian or the bicyclist pushes the signal, and there's a red flash that says stop, and then all the vehicles has to stop for that pedestrian or bicyclist to cross. And with the amount of traffic, motoring public traffic, vehicular traffic you have coming on and off the island and the posted speed limit, we just didn't want to put the situation where somebody pushed the button, stepped out, felt like that as long as the red flashers are going that they're safe, and they might not be, right? So we want to take balance of safety in all facets at hand in our concepts. So this is the current configuration, or it's labeled existing configuration, that shows 2 11-foot lanes with a 4-foot median, and the buffer and the bike lane and pedestrian lane. As you can see, it's looking from Isle of Palms. So if you're standing right over there looking at the bridge, that's the orientation. And you've got bicycle pedestrian accommodations on both sides that tie into the multi-use path on the Isle of, or the Mount Pleasant side, and that tie into the the wider concrete sidewalk that you have on this side. All righty, concept number one. What it does is it gives you the 10-foot shoulder on the north side, the side farther away from Sullivan's Island. It still has the 11-foot travel lanes and 4-foot paved median. It increases the buffer distance, which obviously whenever you want to have bicyclists, pedestrians near motoring public, vehicular traffic, especially at that speed limit and that volumes, you want to try and provide the biggest buffer as you can. The only other thing of note is if we went with this, you'd have that shoulder, that 10-foot shoulder. It could be used for emergency response, incident response, enforcement. So on the Mount Pleasant side, what we would have to do is we would have to mill up that asphalt multi-use path that ties into it, because we don't want bicyclists and pedestrians thinking that they can just keep going and then they're running on a shoulder with fire EMS trying to get somebody off the island. So that would be one of the considerations you have to think about, is that we would probably take that multi-use path up back to rifle range, and we would want to cross those bicyclists and pedestrians at rifle range to get them on that southern side. Any questions about that concept? Okay, I know I just flew through that one. All right. Well, just stop me if you have any questions, please. All righty. So this is concept number two. It's a mirror of concept number one. Same thing goes, though. We'd probably look at taking up the part of the multi-use path on the Mount Pleasant side, again, trying to force the bicyclists and pedestrians to cross at a logical location, which would be that signalized intersection, so they're not coming into your shoulder and really having conflicts with any incident response that might be going on or law enforcement efforts. Are any questions about that one, since it's a mirror of the first one? Okay. Oh. All right. Again, this one is, again, having the pedestrians and the cyclists on the Sullivan's Island side with the 6-foot buffer. Instead of having the paved shoulder, you're going to have the 10-foot median. Same thing goes, or we'd probably still do something on the Mount Pleasant side, again, to make sure you don't have bicyclists or pedestrians trying to run or bike in that 4-foot shoulder on the outside. But again, you'd have that median going down the center at 10 feet.
Is that,
Yes, ma'am.
on the Cooper River Bridge, the space between, on the, basically past the driving, is that the same? Is it 4 feet? I'm just trying to conceptualize.
I don't know. I can check that and get you an answer on that one. Because, yeah, we have some, in the overall report that RK&K is doing for us, we asked them to give us a concept for what, just to provide to y'all in the report of what, if we built a brand new bridge today, what it would look like as far as configuration and geometry. So I will get you that answer of how it's configured on the Ravenel. Yes, sir.
Before we go on to the fifth option, one of the main objectives of this whole exercise was to get more utilization of the bridge, be able to get more cars across. How do these concepts here accomplish that versus what we have or what we had?
That's an excellent question, and thank you for posing that. They really don't add any capacity for vehicular traffic. What they do is they give you that shoulder or paved median back, which was something that we heard was a concern and a want. For some of the other things that I don't want to cloud it, but we've also looked at the intersections on both sides, and so RK&K has recommended that we look at making 14th one-way potentially, and then that takes out 2 signal phases of your signalized intersection. And so your level of service is where I'm going to go geeky engineer on you. Goes from a D or an E in your report card as far as operational effectiveness to a B or C. But that would be something else that we've asked the consultant to really sharpen their pencil, take a deeper dive, and really study it further. And then if we were going to recommend something like that, which would help vehicular traffic on and off the island, then we'd get public comments for that as well, since we would be making a two-way street, a one-way street. So, and then we did retime the intersection here last spring, right before peak season, and Mount Pleasant has done some signal retimings on their end, but obviously we're going to look at how we can tweak both ends to make them more effective. And then a final thing that RK&K's report is going to have that's going to come into January is a lot of the crashes are rear end crashes where people are coming over that crest and rear ended somebody, and it's property damage only, but it's still hurting the effectiveness of your travelers, of your motoring public. And so we're looking at maybe put some detection up that has hey, when flashing, stop vehicles are ahead to try and alert those drivers that if they're coming over the crest, that there's a queue of traffic that's not moving for some reason.
But as far as the design goes of the actual bridge, you're not, these designs really don't have any kind of increased capacity versus what we have or had.
No, sir, it does not.
Okay, thanks.
Could we go back to number 3 real quick?
Yes, sir.
I mean, and thank you for your comments about safety. My understanding is that the wall here does not meet regulation for pedestrians or for bicyclists right now. And so my question is whether or not we could put some type of a metal or aluminum or plastic barrier that would bolt onto the top of this to get it to the right height. I mean, when I walk on the bridge, it hits me right here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my fulcrum. So I'm going right over if somebody bumps me. And is it possible to put some type of a barrier here between the vehicles and pedestrians?
No, those are both excellent points. You know, we have talked about if a bridge was built brand new today, it would have higher barrier walls based on current standards, but we. You want to come up here and do this? It
Rob,
said-
music with your
It
presentation.
said
That's
put
very
me in
cool.
coach. I didn't know if that was subbing me out, but no, you're right. We're gonna have to look at that about whether we need to retrofit and put some type of aluminum tubing on top of the railing to get it higher. You know, a lot of our design concepts, you know, that we follow for ASHTO, it's a greenfield design. And so when I say greenfield, it's a brand new road or interstate's being built through some farmland or some field or through nothing. And now we're kind of getting to the point now that everything is built up in urban areas, and you're saying, can I really fit a greenfield design everywhere? And so you're looking at the trade-offs of how do you retrofit. And so there are a lot of bridges like going out to St. Simons or some in North Carolina where they have these buffered bike lanes. And so we're going to have to look to see how they handled it with the walls, whether their walls were 32, whether they were 42 or 54. Some of them have the raised delineators. So that's something we've got to come back with. If ultimately we decide to go with one of these concepts, we've got to make an informed decision about whether we need to add that railing. The other point about the delineators, we've got to pump out those drains. Remember, I think Councilman Ward, we were talking about in the Zoom call that was one of the environmental commitments to keep from getting any of the water and anything else, the oil, in the marsh when the bridge was built. So we've got these collectors under there that collect that, and we have pump trucks that get in there and have to do them from time to time, pump it out. I don't know if it's quarterly, monthly, but we've got to make sure. That's the only reason why I don't know if we'd want to put raised delineators there for that reason, for access. And then they're also a maintenance nightmare where they get run over and hit, and you've got a bunch of them that are knocked down. So so that was why we didn't include those, adding the raised delineators at this time. But it's a good question.
And one other question is whether or not y'all looked at cantilevering off the side of the bridge, a pedestrian walk.
We did not. We've had other projects where they've asked that, and we've had the local government, whoever's requested, go through that and study it, and it just didn't work out just from a loading standpoint, because you've got to look at whether it can handle the dead load of what you cantilevered as well as the live load of whatever you're going to have on it. So, no, that was not a part of this. Now, the final report, like I said, it will show what a concept would be if we built a completely separate pedestrian bicycle bridge. But you all know, you've read the news of some other ones that are going. They're very expensive, and they're also hard to permit, and you've got to meet the Corps of Engineers requirements for height as well as any type of DHEC and land disturbance permit. So we're going to show you that in the report that we get to you end of January, but it was really just to kind of give you an idea of how we would configure it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Can we just finish the presentation before we ask more
Yeah,
questions?
he was
No,
going
I
with
want to ask,
questions.
I
Go ahead.
want to make
No, I
one
think we
point of
need to answer as we
clarification.
go along.
All right.
Yeah, this is, kind of goes along with what Councilmember Hahn had asked about maybe some sort of barrier between the multi-use path and, the buffer area and the traffic. I think this came up sometime early last year in one of our many conversations that we had at some point, but isn't there sort of there's a weight difficulty or potential weight difficulty with having a fixed barrier added to the connector also, right?
Correct.
And that it wasn't designed to have additional weight, like a concrete barrier or something there, so that might compromise what the bridge could even accommodate or hold.
Yeah, I doubt that it could hold a concrete barrier. So if we would put anything up, it would be those raised plastic delineators because they're very light. But like I said, they get hit by cars and knocked all over the place, and they look poor, and it's just very hard to maintain. And we just want to make sure we continue to maintain
Right.
access to get to pump out those.
Yeah, so in terms of safety, it really wouldn't do that much other than it would caution a driver coming along, just they'd see that there's a visual
Yes, sir.
barrier there. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
A question about concept 2 and 4. If we could flash those up very quickly. There's 2.
All right.
There's 2, and then 4. In these two concepts, we have the pedestrian and the bicycle lanes on the north side of the bridge. Have you looked at the landing area that is very awkward on Isle of Palms? We've made a big investment on making sure that on concept 3 that you had that people on bicycles and people walking, they have a safe space to get off the bridge.
No, you're right. That note number 4, I failed to mention that, but we would recommend extending the multi-use path coming off the bridge and making some type of a positive tie-in on the backside of the grocery store parking lot, because we agree. You're just kind of daylighted once you come off the bridge right now. So excellent point. I'm sorry I missed that part. I think I was listening to put me in coach. I don't know.
Back in 1990, when the final design for the connector came in, several council members, we expressed that we were worried about the runoff from oil from cars and other debris and stuff. They said we needed to put in a system. They said it's never been done before. And we said, well, we're not going to sign off on it. So I think they told us it was like that was the first concept in the United States that was ever installed, crossing a marsh, saltwater marsh. So we appreciate the highway department when getting that put in. And they're out there cleaning them all the time, so we appreciate that.
We'll take all the thank yous we can get. But no, you're right. I mean, I
It's
ran the
never been
bridge
done before.
Yeah, I ran the bridge inspection program down here in District 6 for us, and it's the only one I'm aware of down here, and I'm not aware of any others in the state. I don't know about nationally, but it's an exotic design, but it's good. And, obviously we want to try and strike that balance with the environment and
Right.
impacts to people and the nature. We're ready to go to concept 5?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the one, in speaking with Desiree and others, we obviously collected a lot of information, coordinating with the city over the last 18, 24 months. And one of the requests, and we read it loud and clear from all of the islands, that we've got a lot of visitors that come summertime, especially on the weekends. And could you show us a concept of 2 lanes off? So this is really that concept. It'll be 2 lanes leaving Isle of Palms. We would have to look and see whether we had enough pavement coming off on the Mount Pleasant, or whether we had to add any widening to obviously tie in appropriately and the pavement marking. So we would have to do something all the way to the first light at least, or maybe all the way up to 17. I don't know, but we wanted to show you this is how we would sign that, and this is how we'd mark it. And again, it's got the 4-foot offset for vehicular traffic. It's got the 2-foot. It's actually got a 2-foot shy line for pedestrians. But one thing of note is, again, instead of having that 4-foot buffer down the center, that center yellow line is there is no distance in between the 2 yellow lines. And then you have to also think about, how you handle incident response, because that is another thing that we've heard has been a concern. So, there's a trade-off there. And then we would obviously have to do something on the Mount Pleasant side, again, with their multi-use path to make sure it's logically terminated and pedestrians are carried across to the Sullivan's Island side so that they aren't trying to cross in front of, now it would be 2 lanes of outgoing traffic and 1 lane of ongoing traffic. Are there any other questions on this concept?
Rob,
Yes,
real
sir.
quick, so the question Rusty had about weight. So if you have 2 lanes going off, and if it's dead standstill, if you think a concrete barrier couldn't sit on that bridge, how does that work with traffic?
Well, I mean, when it comes to the concrete barrier, it also gets back to the how would you get in there and pump out those drains? You can't. So maybe we could run a structural analysis and look, and maybe it does say that temporary barrier wall, but for other reasons you would kick it out. But the bridge was designed for more than just 2 lanes of vehicular traffic, so that's an excellent point. So maybe it does load rate for a temporary barrier wall, but we wouldn't recommend it because then we can never clean out your drains and you're dumping oil in the river, or we don't want that. So excellent point.
Yeah, Rob, what does this do to the capacity coming off the island?
Oh, I mean, obviously, being a traffic engineer, your peak 1-lane road that's a primary route can usually take about 1,200 vehicles per hour. So you're going to be able to move 1,200 more vehicles per hour off the island by adding that lane. So you're doubling capacity going off.
As long as you have the Mount Pleasant side.
Oh, yeah. We'd have to work it. Whether you forced the left turn lane to turn left on Rifle Range and the right one went through, we'd have to figure that out.
And what do you do on the entrance into on the island side? How do you enter it? Would it be 2 lanes immediately, 2 turns?
We'd probably have the lane coming from Wild Dunes would obviously feed right into the right lane, and then the other traffic would feed into the left, because right now you've got a free flow right there. So I could see that free flow right flowing right into that right lane, and then the turning traffic and the through traffic from 14 would feed into the new lane. But we'd have to configure that. So you're right, we'd have to redo the pavement markings on this side to make it work.
And at some point, they were talking about putting at Rifle Range as well, doing roundabouts or potential concepts around that. Is that included in the January report that we'll be getting?
It's not. So no, they did have some pavement marking plans to try and add storage for left turns on the Rifle Range that we held up because it also had extended bike lanes off the bridge, and we want to make sure we got this right. We didn't want to approve them to do something, then based on our coordination with you and them, a year later we're taking it out. It just doesn't make sense.
Okay, but you are planning on improvements at the intersections at either side of the causeway as part of this. We just have.
That's
You
part
haven't
of some of the
finalized those
recommendations
yet. from
from RK&K. So yes, but Mount Pleasant, they manage that signal under signal maintenance agreement, and they have updated their signal timing plans for beach traffic, but it's still our signal. So I think one of RK&K's recommendations is to look at no matter what, how we better utilize that signal, as well as if the signal retime we did on this side, if it's not functioning properly for summer traffic, we're certainly committed to retiming that because you really need to retime signals every 2-3 years anyway. Otherwise, you start losing that effectiveness and efficiency.
Okay, well, we have word that the town of Mount Pleasant is watching tonight,
Well,
so
good.
we will get some feedback from them about that as well, I'm sure. And just to let you know, at Rifle Range Road, there are already 2 through lanes and a separate left turn lane at that intersection. And what we're having now is inefficient use of those lanes because all the traffic is stacked up in a single lane coming off the bridge, and that right lane is poorly used.
It's
So
underutilized.
we should be able to double our traffic volume coming up, the capacity off the island. And on those summer days when it takes an hour to get off the island, what that means is it'll probably take 30 minutes or less with a plan like this.
Wow. Katie?
So 2 questions. One, I think, it seems to me, there is space in Mount Pleasant as it is. It is 1 lane now, but you could easily make that between the bridge and Rifle Range 2 lanes, right? Like, that's not a
Yeah,
huge.
I just want to make sure we look at it to make sure we've got the space and
Okay.
how to do the pavement markings.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, because of the no distance between the 2 lanes of traffic, would the speed limit come down?
We're not looking at changing the speed limit this time, as we lowered it from 55 to 45, and we put in the buffered bike lane. So, and the study that you're gonna get from RK&K, and I think y'all have got a consultant that's gonna take a look at it. It's got 200 pages of count data from when they came in March and in July. And, while when it's queued, you've got lower volumes or lower speeds, once it's non-peak hours, you'll see there are some times late at night where there are some enforcement challenges. So I don't see us modifying the speed limit though, no.
Okay, thank you.
And one
Yeah,
more
I
question. if
really
may.
like this option, and as a runner, I think and biker, I think it's better to have this all on one side. I do have one question. I think I know the answer to it, though. Some members of the community were wondering, you know, why can't we have a reversible lane structure versus the 2 lanes off versus 1 lane on? Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I kind of expected that to be one of the questions. It's just from a management standpoint, manpower standpoint, it's just so prohibitive. You know, we had that on for those of y'all who've been here a long time, the old Silas Pyramid Bridge, and we went away from that because it was just too hard to manage. And you know, we've had some other challenges, and we've had some bridge maintenance issues where we were asked and just to have to go out and put out that traffic control every morning and every afternoon. And then the safety aspect of whether it be maintenance forces flipping traffic or whether it be law enforcement forces flipping traffic, there's a safety component too, because you'd have to do traffic control. Because Georgia, Atlanta, a lot of y'all have seen that. They've got the flip lanes and they've got the big sign overhead with the red X, and they're taking out a lot of their reversible lanes because they just had some operational issues too. So no, we would not be looking at reversing the lanes or flipping the lanes of traffic at this point. That's a good question.
Thank you. The far right lane in this concept, how wide is that? On the right-hand side where the white car is?
It's an 11-foot travel lane, sir.
I know that's 11, but the next four.
Oh, the shoulder's 4. That was one of the requirements, is to have a 4-foot.
So my question
buffer.
is that enough room for the maintenance trucks to get in there and service those traps?
Probably not. We'd have to do either nighttime or non-peak season daytime lane closures. But we would look at traffic volumes. We have a whole process for when we'll let people do lane closures ourselves during the day for work.
Yeah, because they're out there quite often.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, on the multi-use path, I think when you go back and you look at the Cooper River Bridge or the Ravenel Bridge, however you prefer to call it, depending on how long you've lived here, I think on that path there, they sort of delineate where the bikers are on one side versus the pedestrians. I mean, it's a suggestion, obviously, but I think, if I remember correctly, the pedestrians, walkers, runners would be on the inside next to the river itself, that particular wall there, and then the bikers are, you know, on the area there next to the traffic.
Yeah, we actually added that after the Ravenel opened up.
Yeah,
just to
because it
try
was
and make
awfully
compliance
confusing for
easier.
people, right.
Because even when you're on a non-bridge greenway, you know, you'll hear the bicyclists with the bell behind you, and you're like, I need to get out of their way. Certainly, but you got to figure out, make sure you've got enough space to do that. So, you know, at 10 feet, I don't know if you've got enough space, since it's two-way, to really delineate both. And we're trying to we've got to live within the space of the barrier walls, right?
Well, I think that I like this option. I think it's the only one, as to my previous comments, that really meet the objective of getting more utilization of the bridge, especially during our peak traffic season. I think to your point earlier, though, around the emergency aspect of it, you know, I think there's plenty of room on both sides for a parting of the cars to be able to get a emergency vehicle through. So I really don't see that as a major issue with this. And as I said, we got a lot of cars coming across there, so I'm curious to see the report when it comes out. I do think this is the best of the 5 that were presented.
Rob, don't go anywhere, but I think residents and council would probably love to hear from either one of our chiefs or both, just their view of life on what these look like.
Mayor, one
Oh,
quick
sorry,
question.
Blair.
Yes, sir.
Whatever concept is picked, when are you envisioning doing the work?
Well, the way I see this going, and that's an excellent question, is we're gonna do the Mount Pleasant presentation. We're gonna do the survey from the public for 30 days, and we're gonna come back to both you and Mount Pleasant, say this is what we recommend. I can't promise that anything will be in by this summer's season, because it just depends. I mean, if we're gonna have to mill up a multi-use path for 2 miles to a signal, that's a little bit different than pavement markings, right? Or if we're gonna have to have asphalt coming off the bridge, which we may not. You know, that, again, it depends. If it's just pavement markings, yeah, that's something that can be done quickly. But if it's going to be some real geometric changes, then we're just going to have to give you an answer once we get to the decision of what it's going to take. Again, or if we're going to put aluminum tubing on a 2 mile bridge, you know, as far as extending the guardrail higher on one side. Again, that's not something quick. It's not just a truck that's eradicating pavement markings and coming back with new ones. So I'm sorry if it's evasive, but I just don't want to sell you a watch that's only right twice a day. Is that fair?
And Rob, what So your plan is to leave it up for 30 days for citizens to comment? And again, that can be anybody in the state essentially could make a comment, but so 30 days is the typical time frame that you would leave it up?
That's typically what we do. We do 21 to 30, and that's why I really, when we were trying to get here earlier and in the year, and I said, well, we all know once you get to Thanksgiving, it gets to a dead period, and people have other things going on, so you have trouble getting good public comment. So we were going to recommend doing the public comment period through January no matter what, just so there was no one that felt like they were left out because they traveled to visit family for 3 weeks or whatever it was. So yes, we typically go 21, 30 days. And then we summarize them and say, okay, where did we really land? And then we make an informed decision. So that's the plan, is do that and then follow up with the city and the town.
So the surveys would include not only residents of Mount Pleasant or anywhere else in the state, but also the different agencies or groups that are pro-cycling.
I mean, typically it's out there for whoever wants to go on the
Anybody.
website and
Right.
comment.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So, the way I understand history, in 1977, Senator Hollins got the money, $33 million for this bridge. It was all federal money. It was like an elephant. I mean, if we didn't use it for this bridge, it was going to disappear or whatever. So after it was complete, I understand the feds turned it over to the state of South Carolina. Are there funds available to address some of the concerns that some of the council members had?
Well, I mean, obviously, the Berkeley, Charleston, Dorchester Council of Governments, which is now called a regional mobility programs, they have a certain amount of federal funding that they have to pick projects. They have to rank the projects all against one another. And many of y'all are probably been on that policy committee or are on the policy committee. But that's how they make an informed decision of how to spend the funds for transportation projects. So there are those funds that could be used if they rank high enough. We have signing and marking funds that are state funds that we use statewide to do, again, signing and marking plans. So we have funds that we can do signing and marking. We also have a separate pot of money that we could do signal retiming. So that's why we retimed your signal, because it hadn't been retimed forever. So there are multiple funding sources depending on what it is you're trying to do.
Thank you.
I'd like to suggest that when you come up with the concept that you want to finalize, that maybe you do it in 2 stages. If there's a part that can be done with just simply pavement markings, that is much easier, that you start that first. And if you're adding a railing or something to one side of the bridge, that maybe that's a separate project, that's a later phase, so that we could move this project forward and get some relief for traffic on the island.
Chief Cornett or Chief Oliveris, y'all want to give us a thought?
Good evening. Would you like me to just start with concept 1 and work my way back? Does that sound good to everybody? Mr. Perry, you mind if I use your clicker, do you? Oh, cool. It's
Chief,
ours.
you got the floor, man. You take it.
So we've kind of looked at each of these, and we've had a little bit of a discussion. We've talked with our team. And just to give you how I'm looking at this as a chief for the police department, I'm looking at emergency vehicle access to and from the island, and I'm looking at management of a vehicular collision scene and where I can move vehicles to should we have one of those. And so one of our concerns with this one, with concept number 1, the white car is easy. If we have a collision in that lane, ideally I could move vehicles into that shoulder to go past, or maybe move it into that shoulder and let traffic continue to use that one. The red vehicle coming inbound would be my concern. You know, the only place I have to send people at that point is into the pedestrian bicycle lanes to go around that. The other option is I just hold traffic and it waits until we can clear this, which will have a long line waiting to get onto the island, and we kind of see how that gets impacted. That's my concern with this one. With the emergency response, I think there's enough room with the white vehicle to be able to pull to the shoulder to the right side like they're supposed to by state law, and the emergency vehicle to come up in the median there and kind of straddle the center of the roadway. So I think we've got that part covered. Same thing with number 2. The only thing I would caution with number 2 is kind of something you've already talked about, where the pedestrian and bicycles, the easiest way for them to navigate onto the island is the area over here behind Public Works. It's already been worked on. It's already there. It's easy to navigate, and people already use that. We would be a little concerned without redoing. I think you would have to redo on the opposite side. Otherwise, you're going to put pedestrians and bicyclists into an unsafe position. For number 3, this is actually my favorite, and I'll tell you why. It gives me a center median for emergency vehicle access to and from the island, but it also gives me that center median to use to move traffic around a collision or to move a collision into. And it prevents us from having to move that into that pedestrian and bicycle lane so that we minimize risk associated with people that are utilizing those paths. Every time we have to move vehicles into that lane, we're putting anybody utilizing those paths in a risky situation. So that's why concept number 3 was my favorite for the police department, just because we've got the ability to manage a scene and we've got the ability to travel the area, and we're still tying the pedestrian and bicyclist into the path that we've already created coming off of the bridge.
Chief Cordat, on number 3, is it possible when traffic backs up because there's a thunderstorm or whatever it is in the summer, for your people to put traffic down the middle lane as well, so that we would have on not emergency situations, but on a regular basis, the ability to do 2 lanes off?
So we briefly talked about this, and we've had a lot of conversation as we've been discussing this over the past year or two about event management. And I've had the ability to work USC football games and see how they manage traffic flow and be a part of that. In certain events, yes, I think you could use that to alleviate pressure on the island. I don't know that it would be realistic to say that during a thunderstorm we would. We're just not going to have the personnel. The only way you would be able to do it is to have a pre-planned event where we've got the resources to be able to do it. And that might be, we talked a lot about treating it like an event, and you could do those on like 4th of July, Memorial Day weekends, those days where we know. And of course, that would be something we'd have to work with our partners at DOT to make sure they're on board with that. But I think it's an option if they're willing to do that with us for a pre-planned event.
Thank you.
But Chief, again, if the other side of the bridge isn't fixed, so to speak, to allow for 2 lanes off, could you really do that?
It would be magical working on that end. Could we? Yes. I don't ever want to say no. I think there's options there, but you're going to have personnel down there to navigate that and move
On
that.
the other side.
Correct. It would definitely require buy-in from our partners at Mount Pleasant. They would have to be a part of that organization to move that, because they're going to have to put resources there just like we are.
And what's the frequency of an event like that now?
Every Saturday and Sunday.
I mean, you get busy every weekend we're out here.
No, I mean, what's the frequency of an event that shuts the bridge down like you're talking about, that would impact that to shut it down today? Is it once a week, once a month?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Most of the time when we close an event, you're talking about closing the connector for an event?
No. What I'm saying is you're describing the difficulty of responding to an accident and clearing traffic. My question is, I'm looking at the weight of every weekend and every event, we can clear 1,200 extra cars an hour, weighing that against what's the frequency of this occurring.
I don't
Because
have the
that-
number of how many collisions we had
Ballpark.
with me tonight, but during the season,
Yeah.
it's not uncommon. I've worked days where we've had 4 in a row. We'd clear one, and as soon as we cleared it, we'd have another one. We'd have to stop. You have some days where you don't have any, but I would say 2 to 3 times a month is fair.
That's
out
okay,
there, and
2
that
to
could
3
be
times a month.
A vehicle that's broke down, could be a collision or something like that out there.
And that,
Is-
go ahead. No, I was going to say, and does that always happen during the high peak times?
Not always. Most of the time, we see our collisions, based on the statistics that Mr. Perry was talking about, most of the collisions we're seeing are traffic-related collisions, where you run into the back end of somebody because it's just stop-and-go traffic. And so that would normally align with our peak season area.
Isn't it common to have, like in other non-bridge areas, but just other areas around the city, I'm thinking of, where you have your quote bike path is actually the emergency or the pull-off area of the road? I mean, that's not uncommon, right?
It's not necessarily uncommon. We try to avoid it when we can, but you have less traffic of pedestrians and bicyclists when we have that, because all you have are cyclists. Cyclists have the ability to move into a roadway and travel with the traffic. Pedestrians don't necessarily have that on here. They can only stay on that side. So bicyclists, yes, it's easier to do that, and it is normally a bike lane that we're blocking with the traffic when we do that. Did I answer that?
Yeah, that's the difference that I wasn't seeing. Thank you.
Number 4, the only issue I have with this one would be the pedestrian bicycle lane where it's coming off on our side. But as far as vehicular, same things would match up. For concept number, Just kidding. Number 5. For concept 5, the outgoing is fairly easy. You have one lane that's blocked, and we just use the other lane to move everybody through it. The oncoming, again, would be my one concern with that one. The only way for them to go is to into the bike lane or move people into that pedestrian and bike lane. The other problem with this is emergency vehicle. You've got most of your roadway is now taken up with vehicles, so it's forcing us to most likely we're pushing that red truck into that lane of bicycle and pedestrian traffic. And that doesn't happen frequently. That's not like a everyday occurrence, but anytime that EMS is responding over here, or if a fire department's responding, that might be more for Chief Oliveris to talk about here in just a moment, but that frequency may pick up with automatic aid and those types of things. So that was my one concern with concept 5, was that oncoming traffic that's coming inbound to the island. Anything else? And I'll turn it over to Chief Oliveris. It's all yours, sir.
All the concepts have their merits, for one reason or another. When we looked at it from a fire department perspective, we discussed this with our battalion chiefs. We had done a lot of research prior to my arrival here as fire chief with EMS on what are their struggles getting out here or getting patients off the island. And so we've discussed that obviously in other, public safety and other meetings. But for example, this one, for us, a fire truck is a lot larger than the vehicles depicted. And motorists obviously can be unpredictable how they react if they have an emergency vehicle behind them. So we have to get patients off the island, but in order to do that, we have to get EMS here. So for example, concept 5, getting patients off the island, this concept would facilitate that a little bit cleaner and easier because you have 2 lanes going off. Again, it's just paint, so vehicles can go, anywhere. But this would facilitate those patients being removed by EMS. The 700 times or so we have EMS out here a year, that would facilitate that. The part that we did not like from a fire department perspective for response would be EMS coming to Isle of Palms or Mount Pleasant or other fire departments coming to assist us. What that means is where that red truck is, it would shade and block that multi-use path totally, or shade into that buffer area in half of that multi-use path. That still gives us the clearance because it's 11-foot travel lane. We still have enough space to make it through, but just the unpredictability of those motorists, it's hard to quantify. When people are on their phones or they're distracted or. But we have that situation now. So that's really no different than we have now with the pedestrian and bicyclist on either side. And the data that we looked at and talking with the EMS historically in the past, and as we have changed the striping pattern, our data and what we've seen anecdotally hasn't changed in our call volume and severity of accidents that we've responded to or response times. It seems to be dropping the speed limit from 55 to 45 has had a significant impact. That's positive, obviously, with lower speeds. So that might be one of the key things to consider are those speeds. I think if we have, our concern is with the small median or the yellow stripe is obviously very narrow. And it's a very beautiful view as you come across Isle of Palms Connector. And if people get distracted and kind of shade over into the lane, there's not a lot of forgiveness there. So there is a concern, and to Chief Cornett's point, having that wider median is, in between the travel lanes is important for those reasons. One question I do have, and probably could be answered, but we have the multi-use path. If we could maybe, if concept 5, for us, if this is something that council, that this concept and the public really is gravitating toward, if this gets a lot of traction, my question is if we reduce the size of the multi-use path, could we add that into the yellow stripe to give more of a buffer in the middle of the road if people are distracted by the view or start to shade over into the other lane. But again, all the concepts have their merit. Concept 3, back to that concept. Let's see. All right. Amy, you might have to help me out. Left, right. There we go. Oh, too much. All right. You got it? So concept 3, if you could bring that one up. You can see the large center lane, and to Chief Cornett's point, when we spoke to our battalion chiefs, a few of them mentioned that they liked that part of it. Traffic could have that protection in the middle. So, but again, concept 5, it does have its merits getting those patients off the island. So each of these concepts have their merit. The fire department, from our perspective and looking at EMS response, we could make all of them work. We make what is currently there in place now for us work. But if we're looking at concept 5, that was definitely something that we would need to look at. Would it be possible to expand that that yellow line a little bit, that space, have a little more forgiveness?
Yeah, Chief, Rob, can you address that tonight or not?
Thanks for your comments, Chief, both of you, because we always want to get input from our first responders and law enforcement. I think I mentioned before on the calls, we do a lot of traffic incident management training to make sure that, when we get to a scene that we all know each other and everybody's roles. So in the best interest of the motorist or the pedestrian or the bicyclist. Yeah, I think when I opened up my remarks, I said that we were going to try, the minimum was a 5-foot buffer, and I believe I said the minimum was a 10-foot multi-use path. I know we set a minimum for a 10-use multi-use path, so I'll look at the requirements for the buffer, but probably what we would do is instead of take away any of the buffer, the multi-use path, is we reduce that shy distance, that's 2 feet, to 1, because that's how it is with some of the other concepts. And so that would give you extra 4 feet down the middle, but that still wouldn't give you enough for an entire vehicle to get down it, but you'd have that 4 feet like you have now. That's what I would recommend as engineers, to keep the 10 and then reduce the shy distance. But then again, I couldn't reduce the shy distance on the vehicular side, so I have to keep that at 4. So I could give 1, and we'd have to look at the buffer distance. But certainly we couldn't make up enough room for a whole 10 feet.
I have a question about that. I don't recall seeing too many roads with a wide median like that striped on it. Is that a common practice for y'all to have that?
No, I mean, and then the concept that y'all be getting later is in the appendix of just what if it was a new bridge. The new bridge, as I remember the concept or the typical section, wasn't a 10-foot median. It was a 4, closer to what is there currently right now today. But what you would have is if we built a brand new bridge today, you'd have 10-foot outside shoulders on both sides. You'd have a raised barrier wall like Councilman Hahn talked about, and then you'd have a separated multi-use path, bi-directional, similar to what Councilman Myers brought up about the Ravenel. So if you built it today, it would be a very different configuration, but it would be a lot wider bridge too to be able to do that, to add those 10-foot lanes and that barrier wall separation.
Okay.
You did a barrier wall separation, then the 5-foot buffer area could be smaller, right? Or no?
Well, it just depends on you're right. It depends on what the barrier was. If it's just the raised plastic delineators, it's kind of like,
But let's assume we're doing concrete barrier there.
Jersey barriers, yeah.
you could, but you'd still have to have that 4-foot offset for the vehicular traffic, right? Because now you
Right,
got
but-
barriers on both sides. So yeah, you could maybe cheat 1 foot off of it, but and then 1 foot off the shy line. So you could get 2
You
feet.
get two feet
Yes,
out
sir.
of it, and then it would seem that you could deal with the issue of getting a vehicle on the multi-use path for purposes of maintenance by opening at either end.
Oh, absolutely. It's a possibility. I'd love to know from the fire chief, police chief, if there was a barrier up, how much, they look at it from a whole different perspective than me, and I always learn something from them, from their perspective. So, I would just assume with the current width that putting a concrete barrier might present additional challenges, but I don't want to speak for others at all. I'm just going to stick to being that engineer.
Can we look at how that road is functioning now with the reconfiguration that you already have in place?
Sure, we've got the crash data for 2022. It was down from 2021, but I only have the 9 months because we get them in 3-month pushes from DPS, and Isle of Palms, Mount Pleasant, they send theirs up through the report beam or whatever it is. But also, you have to have to caveat that or make the acknowledgement that some of these ones that are just rear ends that are PDOs, property damage only, there's never a police report done. You know, the two citizens work it out and they're off the bridge before they're ever there, which is good because it gets them out of the way, but you just don't have accurate reporting. So in 2022, with the crashes down, 71% of them were rear ends and 29% were angles. And again, they're all property damage only. But yeah, it's going to be in the report. I don't have those memorized.
It's
I
like
think-
under 20, though.
Yeah, it was
isn't
like 22 or something that was in
So
the
it's
report.
1 or 2 a month.
But
Okay.
again, that doesn't capture the last 3 months of the year, but they should have gone down somewhat over the last
Okay,
3
1 or
months.
2 a month, and most of them are ones that are not going to stop traffic. Is that what you're telling us? They're probably going to move on.
Well, no, I'm saying of the 20, if there's 22 that we got reported, there's probably more like 40 or 50 where they just said, hey, here's my insurance card, here's mine,
Yeah.
it's just a little scratch, just call me and we'll work it out. And so that's why it doesn't get fully reported. So I want to make sure that
Okay,
y'all
but-
understand that.
But it's not tying up traffic for
No.
a good amount of time. Okay. The other thing I wanted information about too is I think Chief Oliveris, you mentioned it. There was no significant change in response time without the center marked median, the wide median.
Correct. We have not seen, or the data set, is fairly small, but over a short period of time, but we haven't seen any changes between response times, in 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022,
Okay.
over that timeframe.
Has there been any problems with, now you have to use that the pedestrian bike lanes to move out of the way for an emergency vehicle, is that right?
That's correct. It depends on how much traffic is on the bridge and then where people, how they pull over, if they're angled or if there's
Okay.
oncoming traffic, the driver of that fire apparatus or EMS, the ambulance, they can shade into the opposing lane if they have to, if there's no traffic, because you do have a good visual. So it all depends on that
Okay, but the
driver.
vehicles generally are moving off into the side lanes.
That's
the
correct.
Pedestrian bike lanes.
That's correct.
And have we had any incidents with pedestrians or bicyclists being hit or near hits or anything like that that your people might have reported?
Near misses, I can't comment on that, but as far as pedestrian or bicyclists being hit, Chief Cornett may have that information, but I don't have any. When we looked at our data, we didn't see anything that stood out because we didn't really mine for that. We were looking at more response times. We didn't really look at the auto pedestrian call types.
Okay. Chief?
We have not had an incident where somebody has been struck in there. I have witnessed near misses. I've witnessed near misses when we were working a collision and a cyclist just comes through and people open the doors. I've witnessed them pulling over and almost hitting them. So yes, we've had near misses. Luckily, nothing where somebody's been hit.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that is a concern. Okay.
Kevin.
Robert, from a retrofitting time limit, would it be fair to say that concept 3 would be the quickest to retrofit? Stripe, all we'd have to do is restriping and then mill the north path on Mount Pleasant?
It would
Be
definitely
fair
be
to say?
faster than Concept 5, absolutely. So that would be the fastest. And then maybe we could come back later if we decided we needed to add the aluminum railing to add the height. Maybe that could be a phase 2. So yes.
I'd like to just point out on the Mount Pleasant side of the connector that there is a wide yellow striped median now that's there. So the 2 lanes off of the bridge, you've got one active travel lane, and you've got a 12, 14-foot yellow median area that could be restriped as a travel lane as well without having to lay any more pavement. So you probably could extend that lane with restriping all the way to Rifle Range.
Well, until we look
Yeah,
at it,
you need to look at it. You'd have to
Yeah.
refigure the entrance to the shopping center. and
Yeah,
things.
because you have the 2 intersections on both ends. You just have to rework how
Yeah.
traffic enters those intersections, how it goes through across the bridge and back.
Rusty.
Yeah, thank you. Living here, I mean, we're back and forth across the connector quite a bit, but do we track or monitor in any way the pedestrian and the cycling traffic on the connector currently?
We
Either
don't.
through cameras or whatever?
No, we don't. The Berkeley, Charleston, Dorchester Council of Governments, they've got a portable device that can count them. And I don't know if they've counted the Isle of Palms connector, but we don't typically. The only time the SCDOT typically tries to count pedestrian bicycles if we're doing a project and it's specific. I can't recall if RK&K conducted counts. Again, 'cause like I said, there's 200 pages of count data for vehicular traffic, so there may be some pedestrian bike count data in there too, but I don't recall it jumping out at me. But no, we don't have anything that's online that you could just pull. But BCD COG, they were working on a website of all over Charleston where they set up the camera and it would count, and you could pull it and see it.
Because it's part of what they call the greenway, right?
Yes, sir.
Right now. So you would think that there would be some data, and maybe not necessarily for pedestrians, but at least for cycling, that you would know just how much usage it's getting.
Yeah, and I've got some homework for several of you, and I can add that to my list to check. No, because they may have it. I don't have that number readily available to me if they do.
And Rob, is it typical, is there any reason we couldn't start the public comment period now? Or do you typically like to get in front of councils that are affected before that happens?
Yeah, and for the same reason I talked about, it's about to be Christmas. So, if I go to Mount Pleasant January 3rd, we're not going to want to start the public comment period until after the New Year's Day anyway. So for those reasons, I'd really like to give them the same time to ask me questions as you all had this evening, and then we go live immediately after that, if that's what I'd like to do. But it's a good question.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Desiree or Douglas, anything?
She's leaving.
She's had enough. She's out.
She's out of here.
She wasn't up here. I'm just kidding. Well, thank you all.
Rob and Leland, thank you both
Thank you.
for coming and sharing with us tonight. Senator Campson, thank you for joining us and getting us to this point with your help. Jump up.
Yeah.
Well, Rob and
Can you
Hey,
come to the mic?
Senator, just come here so we can get, since we're live streamed, please.
I just wanted to thank DOT for doing this. I sent a letter to Secretary Hall in February of 2021 asking y'all, we were all surprised by the restriping, asking y'all to reconsider this, and you have done that. And we greatly appreciate it, I think, and I think y'all see how important it is to not just citizens, residents of the Isle of Palms, but the greater Charleston area, because they're the ones, people from off of the island are the majority of the people coming to the beach on the weekend. And so it's very important. I just want to express my appreciation to DOT for taking a look at this, and I think we have some good information to work with, some good initial plans that probably can be improved and improve the quality of life and access to the beach for everyone, and we greatly appreciate that. That's really all I mainly wanted to thank them for being willing to do this, and thank you all for your effort to make the bridge work better for everyone, the island, and also people who come to visit us on the weekends and holidays. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. All right, we've got one other item real quick, just kind of a housekeeping item. Approval of assignment of private parking lot agreement with marker 116, just for council and residents reminder. There was a private parking lot agreement for that furthest lot away from the restaurant between MJV and the restaurant. So with all the changes with Mike Schuler and team, the city needs to officially and fully accept that assignment of that private parking lot to the city. So this is really just a house cleaning item, quite honestly.
You need a motion to approve?
Second.
Desiree or Douglas, anything else to add?
No, this was contemplated as part of the lease negotiations. As you all know, Mr. Schuler is not having any management or control of the shared parking or the private parking lot agreement. And in order to be consistent with the restaurant lease and that private parking lot agreement, the city would be assuming the MJV role in this private parking lot agreement with the restaurant.
And this will obviously be a temporary until we work out the final parking layout with the restaurants. So this will be short-lived. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. There being no further business?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.